but she did her undergrad here in music education and performance, and then went on to the University of Nebraska Cornhuskers with John Bailey, and then finished her degrees at Oklahoma University of Oklahoma.
University of,
OU.
but they claim OU.
Yeah, so. And did your doctoral dissertation on the mechanics of the piccolo, and has found her way back to the lovely state of Ohio, is happily married to Joe Mueller, who's a cellist, and
Jojo Ma.
Jojo Ma. And doing well, and just could count on one hand the number of students that I have that I feel are just real standouts in terms of what I feel they've embodied during their time here at OU, and just as a professional and a highly organized person.
I mean, I learned from the best, so.
We're excited to have her here, so without further ado, Dr. Angela, have you.
Thank you to Allison for having me here today, and thank you to all of you for being here this afternoon. I'm sure Allison shared with you that recently I was in the finals for a collegiate job opportunity, and in the process I prepared a lot of materials and learned a lot about the process. So that's what we're here to talk about today. You have my handout in front of you, navigating the collegiate job search. So let's jump right in, because this thing's 6 pages long. There's just so much that you need to know about this experience. So before we go through my handout, I want to start by sharing a binder of materials with you this afternoon. That way, when I'm talking, you each have a chance to kind of look through it and see what's in here. So I want to hand out my business card in case you have questions for me later on. Take one and pass them. And then I just want to take a moment to talk through this binder. So when I kept receiving emails that I was moving on to the next round and things were getting really real with this position, it was really important to make sure I had all of my ducks in a row and that everything was organized and ready to go for the next step in the process. So I created a binder for that process. In the front here, I have my recital program and my information from HR. It just never made its way into the binder, so you feel free to look through that. At the very front of the binder, I have my on-campus interview itinerary. Since I was using this material for that day, I needed to know what room to go to and where I was headed off to next, because there's hardly any downtime in between events. So I believe you all have a copy of that as well. Then after that, I printed off, before leaving for campus, a campus map, because I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to make it from point A to point B. Luckily, I had a committee escort every step along the way, but I had no idea going into it what was going to happen. So I thought, well, if I'm navigating myself across this foreign campus, it's important that I know where I'm going. So there's that. From this point on, each tab represents a different step in the process. So I started with all of my application materials. And for this particular position, which was Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, Washington, I really liked the way that they requested materials. It started with a simple application process of a cover letter and the CV. And I really appreciated that, because with each narrowing down stage in the process, they asked for more material. So you knew going into it where you were amongst your peers. So it wasn't like you were preparing all of these recordings and teaching philosophy and all of these things and then sending it all off and not hearing anything for months. I was very much in the know throughout the entire process. So I have all of those items in the front of the binder. So I've got my CV, you can look at to see layout and formatting, details. Then behind that, let's see, my references, my cover letter, my program that I submitted for my teaching demonstration, so from a master class that I taught here, I sent that information. Got the job posting, so if you want to see exactly how the posting read, you can look at that. They requested a syllabus from one of my theory courses, so I included that as well. This was step 2, round 2 in the process. So evidence of theory teaching was really important to them. And then I also added this other material later on when I knew I was going on campus. I included some course evaluations and assessments that I've done for my classes. You know, in the academic world, you receive your students' class evaluations, and then in some cases, professors are expected to assess themselves as well. So these are my own course evaluations. And then I have samples of student course evaluations as well. So that was all before arriving on campus, okay? And then from there, I had the Skype interview, and we'll talk about preparations necessary for that. These were my notes that I used in the interview process, and then I went back later on and edited from there, adding the questions that they asked me, the committee members' names and information about them, and then any other notes that I had for myself. That way, if I wanted to refer to something from that part of the process, I could go back and look at that during my on-campus interview. Then, the rest of the tabs are organized by event that took place during the on-campus interview. So, first thing, 9 a.m., when I arrived on campus that day, I did my recital. And some people are like, oh, playing. You know, I had a 30-minute rehearsal with my pianist, and then it was showtime. For me personally, I love playing in the morning, and I practiced in the morning. We all audition in the morning. So for me, I was like, thank goodness this is first, because for me, this was the biggest part of the process. You know, I felt like so much was weighing on my playing. So I was so grateful to just get that piece out of the way. So that happened. And I have my program. I went through a couple different formatting ideas with the program. I also included some program notes. And then after the performance, I did a Q&A open to students, faculty, and members of the community. And I had an idea of the kind of things they would be touching on. You know, what kind of impact can you make on our community? Tell us about your recital program. So I wanted to have an outline ready to go. And just honestly, the preparation of that material helped. I didn't need to have this out per se for that interview exchange, but there it is. Then I taught a flute lesson. So I requested the students' rep ahead of time, just so I knew what I was working with, and I was able to research their composer and their piece, and share this information with them in the process. I also made sure to have a copy of their music, and I analyzed the form. So going into it, I was fully prepared for possibilities in the students playing. I also included for myself a handout from a previous presentation that I did here at OU.
Yeah, I should mention that, I didn't mention that you had taught for me for better part of well, 2/3 of the year. Yeah, while I was on, was that maternity leave?
No, that was
my sabbatical.
Yeah. So yeah, in 2012, when Allison took a sabbatical, I was here for 6 months with students. So yeah, this was a presentation that I think I prepared I can't remember if this was before or after that.
Was that your 10 tips for?
Yeah, and I changed the date to the day of my interview and kind of revamped it. But
I think I had you out before you taught.
That's what it was. Yeah, so it was in like 2011.
It was kind of feeling the students out. I wanted them to know you before I decided, you know, for sure that I was going going to go on sabbatical.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
Happy to,
Yeah.
so.
So I included this in the event that I could pass it out to students or at least talk about some of these topics. So, you know, over-prepared is better than under-prepared, for sure. Then, because the position was a flute and theory component, I did a theory demonstration. So you can see my notes for myself as well as my handout. And I actually have some extras of these, so go ahead and take one if you would like. I was asked to teach a first-year theory topic, and the course that I would be teaching is a music fundamentals course. So I went online, looked at their course catalog. It was a very introductory course of you know, how to build scales. So that's why I chose the lesson I did. Well, lo and behold, I had seniors in the class with me, so I quickly had to kind of adjust my approach for the lesson, but I'll talk about that later. Then I scurried off to yet another flute lesson, which was very different in the material that was covered. The student was working on scales. That's all I knew. She had scale patterns that she was working on, so I just quickly reviewed some of my own scale books, threw in, you know, a printout of Tocqueville and Gobert to kind of get the wheels going a little bit, so I had some ideas of what to cover. In this section, is it in here? Maybe, or maybe I passed it already. She also worked on the 4A, must have been the last lesson. I also included Allison's teaching analogies, which I reviewed on the plane ride, just to kind of get in the zone, you know, to make sure I had all the tricks in my back pocket and ready to go, because I didn't know going in, you know, you're going in blind, you have no idea what these students are going to present to you. And you can prepare a little bit, but really it's kind of left up to their performance and what they bring to the table. And I was telling Allison, the very first lesson that I taught, the first thing I noticed as soon as this young lady started playing is that she stuck her tongue out while she was playing.
I mentioned that
You're
to
telling
guys.
me, I think it was my last time.
Where was it? On the side?
Over
Okay,
here.
I'm trying to figure it out.
And so of course I'm standing here and I'm like, and instantly I could have just like jumped right on it, right? But I didn't. I decided to take a different approach and talk a lot about body mapping and things.
She
and
was
then
able to articulate with her tongue stuck halfway out of her mouth.
everything right here. She would articulate the note and then it would just creep out. She had a beautiful sound. So I'm like, do I touch it?
You didn't touch the tongue.
Don't touch it.
Do I? You know what I mean. Right, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. But, you know, instead of just pouncing right on that, you know, we could have spent 30 minutes just on fixing that. I wanted to make sure she was comfortable before I really went in for the kill shot. So that was that. Then I was whisked away for a meeting with HR. Human resources, yes, thank you. And then I listed some possible topics that we would discuss, you know, and some questions that I had. I had a meeting with the dean. You can see kind of my preparations for that. Again, you know, you have no idea what they're going to ask. You can just prepare what you think is coming and then have a list of questions ready to go. I had a meeting with the provost, who was in physics, by the way, so this was quite terrifying going into it, but we had a lovely conversation. And then the chair of the department was my last meeting, and you can see all of that. So, while I go through my handout, I just want you to have a chance to look through all of those materials and jot down ideas for yourself. So, now, the first step in this entire process is finding the postings. So I've given you a list here of places to look. I check Chronicle of Higher Education and higher ed jobs weekly. I mean, every Monday morning. That's one of the first things I do when I'm checking my email as I go to these sites. The National Flute Association also has a listing. I also check musical chairs as well, but that's obviously for more playing positions. However, I was just telling Allison that this past week I found a flute professorship open at the Royal College of Music in London. So I'm like, how do I get a work permit? You know, I'm emailing them right away. Who knew that?
I enjoyed that posting. Must be a very well-established professional flutist.
International. I'm like,
Internationally known.
check. I'm international. Maybe not internationally known. Let's just start with the word international, right? You know? Yeah. So, you know, you find things everywhere. So it's important to check those on a regular basis, weekly if you can, daily if you want to. We all need a job. So get out there and look. Keep in mind that fall and spring tend to be the big times for postings. They really happen all year long. In some academic years, I've applied for one position because that is literally all that has come open. So it is tough, and you know it's cattle call. We're all throwing in our CV and our cover letters for these positions. So you have to read the postings really carefully and see what you think would be the position for you. But apply for them all because you never know. So just get your name out there and get your materials out there. There are several resources that you should consider in preparation for these job openings. I have a stack of books. I'll start over here this time. I'm sure you all know these sources. Let's start with probably the oldest, Beyond Talent, Angela Miles Beeching. That's kind of where I started with a lot of my professional development, learning. And then came The Savvy Musician, David Cutler. He recently released The Savvy Music Teacher, which I have yet to dive into. And then also Making Music and Enriching Lives. Hello. And Having a Blast. This one is for the teacher, and this one is for the student. I found this book just as helpful. We are all, even though we're professionals, we're as much a student every day as we are teachers. So I got a lot out of this source as well. So take those and take a look. Professional development is something that should be on your radar all the time. Every month, I am updating something. I'm updating my CV. I'm trying to update my website. I'm trying to update everything that is me as a professional. And you should do the same as well. I just realized a week or two ago that I did, and this is why this is so important, I did Suzuki certification, the first course, the Every Child Can course in 2010, and I just realized last week that it still wasn't on my CV. What? You know, you have to add these things right as they happen or it will fall off your radar. That's just the reality of how busy we are. So make sure you're updating these materials regularly. Some other things that I've listed here, and I believe Allison has shared these with you as well. These are in PDF format, which is why I had her send these to you electronically. The first is the quick and relatively painless guide to your academic job search. I found that to be very, very helpful. So check that out. Also Career Now, another PDF. Some websites to look at. The Professor is in. Great resource, especially for females in the academic world. She talks a lot about, how to dress and things that you should say and things that you should avoid saying, professional body language and professional appearance, being non-apologetic when things happen. So it's a must read. You have to check out her site. She blogs regularly. She has videos of different topics. Please, please, please check out these resources.
Who is that again? The author?
Karen
Kelsky.
Kelsky. Yes, really great resource. I watched her videos regularly in preparation for my Skype interview. It's amazing how just wording something a little differently makes the biggest impact. Oftentimes we will make a really bold statement, because we're really passionate about something, or are trying to justify something we've done in our career. And so we say our passionate statement and then say, I'm sorry, is that what you were looking for? Why? Add the last piece, just why? So these are really important things. All right, so you check Chronicle of Higher Education, you check Higher Ed, those websites, and you find a posting and it says Flute, and ooh, happy day, something opened up, right? Yes, score. So you start to read the posting. This is the really important piece. You need to make sure that you read every inch of it with great detail. And keep in mind that the job description will often be listed in order of importance, okay? Take every piece of that very seriously. Now, for example, this particular position that I was preparing for was for flute and theory. What do you think they looked for in some of the early stages of the committee search? Okay, who has a DMA in flute and who's taught theory? Boom, boom, 2 piles instantly. Why mess around? You need to get to what are we looking for specifically. So the fact that I had taught a music, and not just any theory class, but a music fundamentals class, instantly gave me an edge. It had nothing to do with my playing, or, yeah, a little bit, and it's, what I'm saying? Those things, just that one small piece, instantly put me on the top of the heap. So that's important, and we can talk about diversification. We've been talking about that a lot as well. Just making sure that you highlight how special you are and what you have to bring to the table is really important. So, with the job announcement, pay attention to the type of position that they're looking for. So, is it an adjunct position? Is it a lecturer role? Is it assistant professor? These things are all really important, and you should really take the time to think about it before you submit your stuff. When you graduate and you're out on the job market, chances are you're not really thinking about, or you'll take it at anything. If it's adjunct, if it's, $30 an hour, done, sign, let's do this. Let's put my name in the hat for everything. Now here I am 6 years out of school and firmly established myself and my husband. So if I see, for example, an adjunct flute in California, I'm not going to submit my stuff for that, because there's no sense in us, completely picking up and carting ourselves across the country for that experience, right? Now, if it's in driving distance, then that's different, you know what I mean? So pay attention to those things. Same thing with a visiting position. If it's a 1-year non-renewable position, again, perfect if you're starting out or if it's relatively close. If you can truly make it work, go for it. And if you have, no strings attached, go for it. Am I going to, again, go for something in Florida that's a 1-year non-renewable? Probably not. Because if they call me and they are offering me the job, and then it's like, oh, okay, how am I going to make this work? You just need to be really careful with that. And make sure you're truly committed to it if it's handed to you. So things to think about for sure. Now, what we're all probably hoping for are these assistant, associate, full professor lines. Something secure, tenure track, right? Everybody's dream. They are hard to find. They really are hard to find. But that's ideally, I think, what we're looking for in the academic search. So now, going beyond that, reading your description is really important. Like I said before, make sure you follow the order of duties, and when it comes to submitting your materials, make sure you submit exactly what they ask for, no more, no less. That's really, really key. So pay attention to specific deadlines. If they ask for 3 references, send them 3. Do not send them 10. You know, make sure you are following it to the T, because that's showing attention to detail right there. So don't give them more than what they asked for, unless they leave something open-ended, of course. So additional materials, optional. If you want to send your transcripts and your teaching philosophy, knock yourself out, but really follow the posting quite closely. It's really important to check these postings in multiple locations. Let me give you an example. There was a posting recently in the last couple months for Wichita State University. It's assistant, tenure track line, everybody's dream job, right? So in Chronicle of Higher Ed and in Higher Ed, they are listed as open until full, or open until filled. So send your stuff whenever you feel like it, right? Soon, if you want to be considered. But then I checked the NFA's website and I saw a deadline for March 10th. Okay, well, which is it? I'm gonna go with the one that has a deadline, right? So make sure you look in multiple places, because the listings that are posted are always slightly different, and you get a different piece of the puzzle when you look at these in these different places. So pay attention is what I'm trying to say. Now, when I apply for all of these jobs, I keep electronic files of everything that I send. So I create a folder on my desktop, name it the university's name, and then inside that folder, I have the cover letter that I sent them, I have the exact CV that I sent them, I have the list of references that I sent them. And this is really good, because when you're applying for, say, 10 things in one academic year, it's really good to know which version they received. So keep a folder that's specific to that particular institution. We're all doing so much that it's changing on a weekly basis, honestly. So keep those files, and then you have them to refer back to. I haven't gone on to a second or final round in 3 years. That's how long it's taken me. In 2013, I was in, a second round and a final round for 2 jobs. That's how long it took to be recognized again. So when I was offered a Skype interview, I was like, oh my gosh, job applications. Let's see, that was 2013, Indiana University, Richmond. Let's find that folder. Here's my Skype notes. You know, so I had a starting point. So keep those files, it's really important. Now, another thing that you need to think about when you are creating these materials for these jobs, you need to, number 1, make sure that you include a footer on each document, and you'll see this in my examples. So, for example, my CV in the footer says Dr. Angela Heck Mueller. This is my curriculum vitae, page 1. Because if they are printing out your materials, you know, I like to have things, that's when I find mistakes, you know, or whatever. You like to have the in-hand paper copy. That's how things get messed up. So you want your work, you don't want anyone else's stuff confused with your own. So make sure you label your documents. The same is true for the electronic files. Now, for some of you know that I manage a music school in Columbus, where we have 450 plus students. So you can imagine that I'm looking at a lot of resumes on a regular basis. And I will tell you that probably 90% of the resumes that come to me for teachers who are looking for jobs, they attach a document that says resume.doc. And you know what I have to say to that? Not interested. Why am I sitting here and downloading your document and having to rename it myself with your name and resume, right? Everybody has a resume. Make sure yours stands out by naming it something that is a piece of you. So please, please, please include your name on these documents. So give us the title of the document and then your name. And not only that, but after you've created the document, once you have that version ready for that specific job, make sure you turn it into a PDF format, because the second that you send it electronically, things can be altered. And when you take a 6 or 7 or 12 page CV and that happens and everything goes scattered, do you think they're going to take that seriously? No. So save it as a PDF before you send it. Now, if for whatever reason there is a question about the posting, so like, for example, this job in London, you know, I'm reading this and I'm like, ooh, I'm going to apply. Why not? The worst they can say is no, right? I emailed the chair of the committee and said, what do I need to do to get a work permit? Because according to this website, I cannot get a work permit from the UK unless I've received a job offer. Well, she turned around and wrote me back today on my drive here and said, we can only accept submissions from people who already have it. So therefore, you're not eligible. Like, how does that work exactly? How are you going to get anyone outside of the UK? How are you going to get your international superstar if you're not allowing? Well,
At least you didn't fill out all that work though.
Exactly, and that's why I contacted them to say, okay, can I submit my stuff or not? You know, and I got the answer I was looking for, and it was quick and painless, and there it is. You know, so now let's talk about qualifications and terms. It's really important, like I said earlier, to take the position seriously because they mean what they say. And the PDF that I shared with you, this quick and painless guide, takes you through the entire process. And you know, you have to keep in mind that every single professor is doing, you know, above and beyond their workload and have families and all of these other professional obligations. Guess what? Being on this search committee is the next thing that was tacked on. So they are looking through these materials, you know, 10 o'clock at night or whenever they can squeeze in a moment, and they don't have time to mess around. So, you know, it's either your stuff is together or it's not. Like, there's no time for fuss over it, right? So please, please, please pay attention to the posting. And this goes for the degrees required and degrees suggested. I can tell you right now that any NASM accredited institution, if the posting says DMA required, if you're ABD, all but dissertation, don't bother. You will instantly be put in a second pile. That's just the reality of that, okay? Now, some postings will say master's required, doctorate preferred. Yay! Yeah. And in that case, there will be some separation, but if they see that you've gone to a really prestigious institution or you have all of this real-life professional experience, then you're instantly in the good pile. The top 5, right? So these things matter, you know, and that's why we have to stay on top of our documents. You have to make sure that you're adding in every little ounce of things that you've accomplished into your CV, because it really truly pays off when they're looking at your materials. So any questions over that so far? Good. Okay, let's talk about your cover letter. Your cover letter has to be flawless. No typos whatsoever. If they are reading a misspelling or some grammatical error, they are over it. They're not going to bother with the rest of your application. So please take that portion seriously. If anything else, that is what they see. So start with that. Make sure it's flawless. Also, make sure that you follow standard writing procedures. So 2 pages at the max. I've heard before no more than 1. You can go 2. 12-point font, 1-inch margins, a pleasing font. Did I say that right? 12-point font, and choose the font wisely. That's what I was trying to say. be careful, don't use anything too, don't use that for your cover letter. Keep it, you know, Times New Roman, you're golden with that. So, also, in the cover letter, you know, you want to state clearly the position that you are applying for. So that means the name of the position and the name of the institution. Make sure you know how many places that you list their name, because anytime you apply for a new job, you're going back to an old file and using that as your starting point, right? Oh, I am so pleased to see this posting for Wichita State University. Paragraph, paragraph. I would love to have the opportunity to pursue this position at Pacific Lutheran University. Could you imagine? They'd be like, next. Just tear it up, move on. So be very careful when referring to these institutions in your letter. Let's see. You can make sure you show, don't tell. I love teaching, I'm so passionate. Give them evidence of your effective teaching in your letter. Make sure it's very clear and to the point. Show them why they need you at their institution. So give them examples of your teaching and your experience. You can touch on your DMA or your dissertation if you would like to. Honestly, for degrees that, for positions that require a DMA, I don't think they're as interested in your document. Of course, they want to know that it's done and they want to be able to look at it and read it, but I find that it's more PhD positions where they're very interested in, okay, let's talk a lot about this document, and has it been published yet, and what is your second project? That's more of a PhD line. It's still important for DMA, but I honestly didn't have any questions about my document in this on-campus interview. Phew. Yes, of course.
When I did a posting for UMass Amherst this year, they asked for, in the cover letter,
Yes.
they asked for, please send us your links, YouTube links
I remember that.
to performances.
Yes.
Where did you put yours? Like, where did you feel that was did you want to put it right at the beginning, here are the links, to see it right away, or did you want to talk first about yourself and then put the
I
links?
put the links at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason why, if you read my cover letter, in the last paragraph, I mention about like extra materials. So
Okay.
confidential letters of recommendation will be sent separately upon request. Oh, and by the way, here are my links, thanks, bye. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So I included it at the end. I thought that was unusual too.
Okay.
I think that was almost bait to see who was paying attention, because that was really unusual to
Just to
request
actually put your
links
links
in the. I've never
cover
seen
letter.
that before except for that posting. Yeah. So I just included it there as well, and I'll talk a little bit more about those materials later on, for sure. But that's a really good question because it was an unusual posting for sure. Are there any other questions about the cover letter? No? We're doing okay on time? Okay. Let's move on to the curriculum vitae. It's really important now, since you're all still in school, to include everything that you've done. Now, once you've graduated and once you enter this professional realm, it's important that you kind of shift your focus a little bit. So you can list the same material, but it needs to be listed in a different way. So, and this is something that I've recently changed in my CV after looking at yours. For example, when I graduated college, and I had a section about here are some additional people that I've studied with, and here are the master classes that I've participated in. Someone, as a critique, mentioned that it looked too student-based. I'm presenting myself as a student as opposed to presenting myself as a colleague. I'm like, okay, that's a really good point. So those particular sections I had taken off completely. Then I looked over your CV and noticed that you had more of like you took a professional development turn, like festivals attended, for example. So I was like, oh, here I had removed all of this information completely. Like it wasn't even on my CV anymore. And I never thought to present it in that way, you know, rather than, oh, I was a student participant in said masterclass. Rather, I attended as part of my professional development. So I went back to an old CV that I still have from 2010. I tried to find, oh, okay, here's where I listed, you know, I attended this masterclass on this date. And that's, at this point, 15 years of professional development, right? So it's important to keep those old copies handy for you. So again, no typos on your CV. It is constantly evolving, and it should, at least on a monthly basis. I find that if I don't update it every month, I forget something. We're all performing multiple concerts a week, so you have to keep it up to date. Make sure it's consistent. So if you list activity first, followed by dates, then do it all the same. If you list dates first and then blah, 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 keep it consistent, okay? Next, let's see, I already covered that. I gave you a list of sections that you can include. The order, I think you would hear a variety of different opinions on this. One thing I try to do on the very first page of my CV is I start after all of my contact information, obviously, current positions. Here's what I'm doing right now. I'm at this university, in this school, in these orchestras, boom, 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 boom. And then after that, education. Here are my degrees, and here's who I studied with, and this is the year my document was written, and here's the title. And this is my GPA, and blah, 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 blah. So all of that stuff comes first. In that sense, it's almost like you've handed them an academic one-page thing. They're seeing the most important stuff right up front. And then from there, you can get into your teaching and your performance and organizations that you have membership in and have held offices for, and all of these other things. But right out of the gate, you need to make sure they have the most current and up-to-date information. From there, I think it's really important with these submissions to make sure you are revamping and reorganized based on what they're looking for. So this was tough, I think, for the PLU search because they wanted flute and theory. Obviously, my time here at OU is really important because I was doing, you know, undergraduate and graduate theory or flute teaching. And then from there, Ohio Dominican is really important because I've taught all of my academic courses there. See what I mean? So organizing that in a way where they can see exactly what they want right away. It's almost like you have to hand it to them on a silver platter. It needs to be easy peasy so they see exactly what they want right up front. So tailor each document for that. Now, letters of recommendation. Have you all heard of interfolio.com? Yes, I see some no's. So this is an online resource that you can use. You have to pay for a membership to it. You can do a year or a 3-year, what is the right word? Membership, I guess. And what you do is you upload all of your important documents. For me, I used it specifically for letters of rec because I could have my writers submit their documents to my site. I couldn't open them or look at them or read them. However, I could control when they were sent places. So in the beginning, when I was just getting started in my career and applying for everything under the sun, I had 3 standard go-to letters from Allison and other teachers and other colleagues. And every time I applied for something, I could choose those 3 letters and they would be sent directly to the committee chair or wherever. So that was great because then I wasn't beating down their door or sending an email every 5 seconds. Hey, I've got another letter. Hey, can you write another letter? Can you write another letter? Can you write another letter? you know, because they're doing this all the time. So it was really, really convenient. The more that I've read and the more that I research about these letters, if they can be tailored for the position, is better. And not only that, but we grow and we evolve and we change too. So the letter that Allison wrote in 2010 is probably a lot different than the letter that she wrote this year, because I've done so many different things, you know. So it's really, really important to consider that as well. Also, think about who you're asking to write letters for you. If you can find some sort of connection for each school, then you're in good shape. For example, I applied for the Wichita State job. I used my same recommenders that I used for PLU. I thought, hey, that helped, so I might as well do it again. So I had Allison to highlight my flute experience. I asked my supervisor at Ohio Dominican to talk on my teaching experience in the classroom, and then I asked my maestro for the orchestra, again, to highlight playing experience in a different professional capacity. So I thought, hey, they can write on different aspects of me as a professional, and that worked well. For this last Wichita State posting, I used the same three. However, I contacted a friend because he happens to be the conductor for Wichita University, Wichita is it Philharmonic or Symphony? I don't remember, honestly. But he conducts the junior ensemble. So I said, hey Wes, how's it going? Just wanted to let you know that I applied for this job. Maybe we'll have a chance to work together again. I just reached out to say, hey, just so you know, blah, blah, blah. And he wrote back and he was like, send me your CV. I would love to write a letter on your behalf. I was like, oh, okay, why not? It doesn't hurt to put a little bug in the chair's ear, you know. So if you can find a connection like that, it's really, really important. Moving on to teaching philosophy. I see this on occasion with postings. Every once in a while, they'll ask you right out of the gate to send your teaching philosophy. So if you haven't thought about it, it's good to start, you know, draft something, and again, it will evolve a lot with more experience. So write that, update it on a regular basis, because your ideas will constantly change. So keep that in mind. Also, again, give specific examples to support your ideas. Explain what you've done to develop this teaching philosophy. Moving on to performance and teaching examples. When I started this process of the academic job search in 2010, it's completely different now in 2016. I had to send a CD and everything in hard copy through the mail, and now everything is electronic. The only thing I print out, honestly, is my cover letter so I can sign it and then create a PDF of it. Yeah, sign that. I meant to say that earlier. Do not send an electronic signature. Print out the letter and sign your name above it. Please, please, please. That's important. But that's the only thing I print out anymore. And even, I'm not burning CDs for these things. SoundCloud is perfect. And the thing that you need to keep in mind, you know, for example, the Wichita State job, not only wanted 30 to 45 minutes of solo and chamber music, but they also asked for 6 excerpts. I don't need everybody hearing my Firebird, you know what I mean? Like, I was relearning just to get the application out. I don't want everybody to hear that, personally, you know? So I made it private so they can hear it if they want to listen to it, you know what I mean? Same thing with my teaching video. I didn't want to take the time, sadly, sorry, to seek out all of these students to say, hey, can I post this on you? Oh, I don't have your permission? Shoot, okay. Can I post this on YouTube? I just created a private link so that only they can see the video for this purpose, right? So those things you need to keep in mind. Again, when you send this information, your playing and your teaching examples, make sure you include your name on the excerpt and the title of the piece and the composer. It's so important. Okay, let's get into the really good stuff, and this is the process of finding the candidate. So the first step is the call for materials. The department or the dean has received approval to post this position, and they do. After that, the floodgates open, and they are receiving, hundreds and hundreds of applications, right? We all need a job. We all want that dream job. So, it's complete and utter cattle call. They're all coming for this job. The first step, the first round, is always cover letter and CV. In some postings, like the Wichita State, they wanted everything up front. All the recordings, all of the letters, all of these things. But usually it's done in rounds. So first round is definitely cover letter and CV, possibly transcripts. Make sure you have electronic copies of those now and later when they're finally complete. Go ahead and purchase your copy of your grades so you have the official transcript. And then second round is a narrowing down process. So they've read your cover letter, they've read your CV. Within the qualifications, they've started to sort things in piles, or they've created spreadsheets and started to rank people and eliminated quite a few. That's another big step. I have to say I really like the way Pacific Lutheran did this, because I knew every step of the way. There were 5 different rounds, and I knew where I stood at all times. That's not always the case. So second round might be additional materials. They might ask for recordings. They might ask for writing samples. They might ask for a syllabus, teaching videos, all of these things you need to have ready and waiting for this moment. Because oftentimes, these postings aren't convenient for you. We've got 5 million concerts coming up and oral exams or whatever. And you have to have all of these materials waiting in the wings to use them. So make sure it's all ready to go. Third round is usually a Skype interview or a phone interview, and then the final round is the on-campus, the live experience. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the Skype or phone interview. I think for the most part now with FaceTime and Skype, they just go ahead and do Skype these days. I've had one experience where it was over the phone where they couldn't see me, but the rest have been sort of a virtual face-to-face interaction. When you prepare for these experiences, you need to make sure that you are picking the brain of many professionals. I was on the phone constantly with Allison in preparation for the Skype interview. I was on the phone multiple times with Bruce, my chair at Ohio Dominican, because he had a different advice to bring to the table because he knows me in the classroom. I talked to leaders in the corporate world about some of their pet peeves when they're interviewing candidates. One of my best friends who I have the blog with, she's just the youngest director at Nationwide in Columbus and interviews people all the time. And she said, if they're a minute late, I don't care how the interview goes. If they don't send me a handwritten thank you note at the end, I'm not interested. Everybody has something that just, they're like, nope, that was my pet peeve and not interested anymore. So it's really good to ask around and find out what are some of your pet peeves? What do you think I really need to focus on? Or what do you think they will focus on? So on and so forth. Same for healthcare professionals. I talk to a lot of people in that field when they do interviews, and they had a really interesting perspective too. So talk to as many people as you can to get advice when you're preparing for these things. It's really, really, really important that you research the institution. At this point, if you are getting a phone call or a Skype interview, it is real. This is happening. Be ready to just move your life, because this is go time, right? So make sure that you look at every ounce of their website and know it inside and out. Not only the music department, but the entire university. Just look at as much as you can. And from there, you need to know their mission statement like the back of your hand. Know what they are about as much as a website has to offer. They'll teach you along the way if you get the job, but you need to know as much as you can going into it. Ask other teachers, ask your peers. If there are any kind of connections, you can find out information about the school. Allison's been there. What do I need to know? You know, tell me about the hall. Tell me about this. Tell me about that. That way, when I presented this interview, you know, I could say, oh, I hear your hall's amazing. Oh, she's listened. You know what I mean? She's talked to someone. Just a really small comment like that, instantly, they see you're committed to it.
I was gonna say, my dad did one where he interviewed and then made someone stand up, and the girl was only dressed from the top up on a Skype interview. People don't think about that. She was wearing her pajama bottoms on the bottom. Engineering interview.
Wow.
Whatever way you can weed out the contestants.
I-
Dress as if you are in person.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Seems crazy, but you know.
I even put on my shoes. I was like,
You never know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Imagine their surprise when she was wearing her flannel PJs
With like
with
cartoon
a dress.
characters or.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
My mom does a lot of interviews. She hired a lot of people from India and for her company, and she had to go to Skype interviews because the people calling were not people showing up for the job. So they
Wow.
were talking on the phone. Somebody
Sure.
sounds great, and the person shows up and doesn't know how to do anything. So
Yeah.
that's probably why they're moving to Skype for college jobs.
Sure. Yeah. Well, in preparation, I talked to a lot of people who said they're amazed how one candidate in particular could almost be 3 different people. When you hear them on the phone, when you see them virtually, and then in person. This one woman who I was talking to said, I thought this one candidate instantly became 3 because their demeanor and their interaction was so dramatically different. So that was something to think about, you know.
I think we look at it too as you have, basically with Skype, you have many more candidates that you can interview, whereas if you,
Exactly.
you know, universities are not gonna bring in 6 candidates onto
Cheaper.
campus.
Yeah.
It's cheaper.
Yeah.
You get to see that person's great.
Right. It's really, I mean,
Yeah.
how amazing to have that opportunity. And here I stand and touch my face, you know, and those are the things that you can't do in a Skype interview, you know what I mean? You have to be really aware. I just think of the nonsense that I do when I'm on the phone with people.
Or look, there's that little box. It's
Oh, yeah.
so hard to not look at yourself when you're
Right.
on Skype.
Yes.
Sure. You
Do I
know,
look
put it
okay?
right under the webcam. But like, it could be you.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Put a Post-it over your face so that you
They
don't
see
know.
your every move.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to be like, I mean, sometimes when you're on the phone, you're not thinking. I wander around, I
Pace,
do things,
yeah.
you know? But to be sitting there, you don't want to fidget. You want to think about the way you're using your hands. You don't want to mess with your hair or touch your face, you know? All of these things, you have to be very, very aware. Someone who I was talking to in preparation also said she's experienced candidates who will answer the phone. She said she did this one interview where the guy answered the phone on a busy street corner in like a major city. So, you know, and he must have forgotten about the interview because he's like, hello? You know, and never once stopped to say, I'm so sorry, I'm on 5th Avenue in New York City, you know what I mean? To explain what all the noise was. I actually have a really embarrassing story about Skype interviews myself. When I did a Skype interview for Manhattan College, or what was it? borough of Manhattan. I don't even remember. It was back in 2013. I decided to use our home office for the interview. You know, you need a really pleasing backdrop, a quiet space, something with a good Wi-Fi connection. I've got that all listed here. I shut myself in the room and did not put our cat in another room. He, that little jerk, I love him to death, he came to the door. So I just started talking louder and louder in hopes that they couldn't hear him. And I remember ending that and just thinking, and I opened the door, no! Why? Like, I knew it was over. I mean, there's a story to go in the book. So for this experience, I'm like, I made a note, a reminder to myself. Now we have two. So I'm like, okay, you guys are going in this room. Make sure that door is latched. I'm going to go in this room and pray to God you don't reach up and open the door. It went fine. But, you know, things to think about. And things do happen, you know. I was lucky enough to have my interview on a Tuesday or a Thursday. But on Wednesdays in Columbus, we have an emergency alarm that goes off at noon. So had it aligned, you know, you hear these, I would have had to stop and say, I'm really sorry. You know, we have this alarm that goes off throughout all of Franklin County. Let's proceed. You know, it's good to communicate, and that's where I really dropped the ball. I just tried to ignore it. You can't hear a cat meowing, right?
Do you wish you would have gotten up and like told them, hang on a second, or was that like a...
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, it was just humiliating, you know? But what do you do? I mean, what if the UPS guy comes to the door? Or, I don't know, like things happen. I should have said, I'm really sorry. Hold on a second, scoop him up. I mean, yeah.
Here's the cat.
I mean, at that point, the whole thing was just scrapped, right? So, you live and you learn. It's just like performing. They're never perfect, but you can learn something every time, you know? It's just life. So, anyways, in preparation for the Skype interview, like I said, make sure you research the institution as a whole, the department, and the school. So not only for this job, it was arts and communications and then the music school. So research each piece, know it like the back of your hand, and ask specific questions so that they know you did your homework in preparation. Prepare, this is really important. When the interview starts, they will go around the table and introduce themselves. And this is your point where you finally have an in on who's on the committee. So you need to frantically write down their name as best as you can remember, and later you can stalk them on the school's website, or learn about them and find out what connections you might have with that person. That's really, really important. Have a list of potential questions you think they could ask, and I will tell you, they will start with, tell us about your direction as a musician. Well, first, why do you want this job? Why are we a good fit for you? Then, your direction as a musician. They will ask you about recruitment, your teaching philosophy, and then specific things about the post. So for a flute job, they wanted to know my experience with the woodwind quintet, or my theory background in my teaching. So they will, I mean, it's quickest half hour of your life, but you need to be ready to deliver. And then, when they ask you, do you have any questions, you better. Make sure it's a laundry list that you know you won't be able to get through, but ask as many until they cut you off. That's exactly what happened with me. I just had a huge list. I knew we wouldn't get through it, but I asked very pointed, very direct questions so they knew that I was committed. They knew that I'd done my homework. They knew I was invested. And then when they needed to get on to the next thing, sorry to cut you off here, but we need to get to our next candidate. Okay, thanks. I'll save the rest of my questions for later.
Is that an appropriate time to ask about financial things?
Like pay?
Yeah,
what
but
you
do you
mean?
think, is that, if it's not clear, that's not a good time, yeah, you would.
No.
Okay.
That actually didn't even come up in my human resources meeting. Some pieces of it, like,
I saw you had moving expenses written on here.
yeah,
So that
for the
kind of thing.
HR.
Okay.
Yeah, that, and I honestly didn't even ask that, because when I was in my final interview, that's when we talked salary, and the only reason why he brought it up was because another candidate had asked. So he felt I was the last candidate that they met with. So he said, this came up in a previous interview, and I think it's only fair to mention it to you as well. Here's the salary, non-negotiable. Okay. So I didn't even bother asking about moving expenses or, you know, I just, okay, thanks.
Yeah, we talked about this. We talked, and we talked about, you know, you wanted to know, could you get a layout of the, you know, of the city, and should I talk about should I ask about housing?
Right.
You know, if no one offers to take you on a tour of the city, you kind of have to do that stuff on your own.
Yeah.
It really, you have to be careful about, yeah, asking if you want this job bad enough, and it's one of your first jobs, and there's no negotiation,
Yeah.
that is it. Do
That is
not
it.
ask for anything additional. I know for our music ed job, I think that there were some startup monies, but that should have been offered as a part of the package, or negotiated with someone who's already in an established tenure track line that can do these kinds of things. But in the beginning,
Yeah.
you wanna say, you don't wanna ask any more than what you're,
Yeah.
when it comes to money, when it comes to, housing, when it comes to, how are you gonna help my family get established?
Were you privy to the other candidates in the final round?
Sorry.
Did you know the other two candidates by the time you got to the final round?
I still don't know who the third candidate is. Yeah. I had an inkling who one of the candidates was, and I was right. And from there, I have yet to receive any official documentation from the university. They said something would be coming from HR, and I really hope that third person, because I know that someone else is really, you know, worked really hard and is probably feeling the exact same way I do right now. You know, it would be nice to, hey, we're in this together, you know? So, yeah, you don't. With the Skype interview too, I think the Skype interview and the on-campus are very different, because with a Skype interview, that is your 30 minutes to shine. Show them you know everything about them, and well, really, most importantly, that you show exactly why you're doing this, and here's why I would be a good fit for this job. And on the flip side of it, again, they're making sure that you did your homework and that you're not crazy. You know? I mean, honestly, it's a really quick way to say yes, no, yes, no. You don't know anything about the institution. Sorry, you know, you haven't done homework. You've got a crazy cat meowing at your door. Sorry, you didn't prepare properly. I mean, you know? So, yeah, I mean, there's something to be learned from that as well.
We probably have to finish up with, I'm assuming,
Oh,
that
sorry,
you're.
we went over.
Yeah. Anybody have any?
I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sure,
I really enjoyed
yeah.
the presentation.
Yeah. Does anybody have any other particular questions about some of the other topics?
Just
Or
realized
just
we went over.
other things that you learned from going in person? Yeah.
Yeah,
Final
this
review.
is probably the most important part too. I'm really sorry, guys. The break periods are really important, I think, when you are on campus. You need to make sure that you're refueling yourself and just taking really good care of yourself, hydrating. When I was at Indiana University Richmond, they did not schedule me any breaks, and they sent me out with a realtor to look at property. And little did they know, because I had no idea leading up to it that I was in the final round. We'd closed on her house the day before, literally the day before. So she's all like, what's your price range? Let's look at these neighborhoods. Let's go shopping in this little store. And I was just dying inside because I'm like, what the heck is going on? You know, we just literally signed this contract yesterday. We're moving in a week. And I haven't had a chance to go to the bathroom, and I have a presentation in 30 minutes, and you are shopping in this boutique, and I need to be at the university. It was completely insane. So I literally swooped in. She got me there 5 or 10 minutes late. I had no break time. I just had to go in and do my lecture, and it was miserable. I felt so sick. So every schedule's different, and you need to be thinking about it before you go. How is this logistically going to work?
Where did you go for the breaks? Were you just sitting down with the people, or
No,
they put you in a room by
I
yourself?
went. That's a good question too, because I think it's different from scenario to scenario. But in some cases, they'll give you a private room, so I've heard. But for this, I went to the bathroom. I hung out in the bathroom, you know. And honestly, a lot of it was transportation. They were walking me to the next place. So the 15-minute break was really walking across campus. I really wish I would have worn flats. I wore heels because I'm vertically challenged, and you know, it was a huge dilemma in my mind. And I wish I would have gone with flats, because half of the committee, over half, were men, at least a foot taller than me, with big strides, and I was hoofing it. I mean, I really struggled to keep up, because you have your flute and all your music and a giant binder and everything you think you need that day, and it's with you all day long. There's not a place to put all of this stuff, you know, so you have to keep that in mind. Let's see, I talk a little bit about that and what to bring. I would highly recommend making sure that you have copies, backup copies of everything, a backup outfit in case the baby next to you on the plane decides to get sick. I've heard horror stories of that. Be mindful of the transportation to and from the airport. I wore suit even though I had planned transportation. Who knows? What if they ask, was she wearing pajamas or jeans, or I don't know. What if something changes and one of the committee members comes to pick you up instead? You want to look your best. You want to be ready. You're on the entire time you're there. That includes meals. So if you think you're going to be full by the end of the meal, probably not, because they're eating. They ask you a question and they're eating and you're responding. So my way of dealing with that and feeling like I could eat my meal was to ask them a question, and then yeah. So some other things, I give you some additional tips in the back. This is really important. If you have any accommodations that you need, if you're vegan, you need to let them know the second that you say, this is the date I can come to campus, and by the way, I'm vegan. Because the second that they sent me an itinerary, they took me to a seafood restaurant. And I remember, and I eat seafood, you know, I love it. But I remember thinking like, I'm gonna get food poisoning the night before my recital. That was the first thought that went through my head. I didn't say anything, I went, it was fine, but instantly I was like, oh, kind of stressed a little bit, because before recital, I don't think I would normally eat a lot of seafood, you know what I mean? So I'm like, you know, if it were an issue, you should say something beforehand. I also make a note here to be yourself. So if you normally eat granola and fruit, eat that. If you are a waffles and bacon, make sure you remain yourself and do you, be you, do your routine. Alcohol, I mentioned that on here, is tricky, because I've read that if they offer it, you know, you can partake if you want. It should never be forced upon you, or you know, if they say, hey, we're gonna have a glass of wine at dinner, if you would like to join, that's great. But hey, you have a recital tomorrow, you should have a beer, I'm gonna stick with water. Thanks. What? You know, that shouldn't be happening, you know. So if you are, I drink a water with my dinner, then be you. You know, don't feel the pressure to do something different. So that's really important. Think about your appearance. Make sure that your outfit is tailored and that you have a backup outfit and that your hair is done nice and that it's out of your face and that you've thought about your jewelry and all of these things. Manicure, polish your shoes. Every piece needs to be exact. So think about that as well. Make sure you are mindful of your body language in all steps within the process. We get tired and, you know, it's hard to perform all the time, but you need to be really mindful of that in the Skype interview and in the live interview. I have terrible posture, so I feel like I'm constantly correcting, you know, when I stand or when I sit, and when I eat, and all of these things. So I had to be really mindful of that. So here's the last piece that's really, really important. I did a ton of mental and physical preparation leading up to it. For me, I have mental judges. If you haven't read Soprano on Her Head yet, do it, because it was a life game changer for me. But I am constantly in my own head, and it can be just a complete and utter deal breaker. So in preparation, I had 2 audiobooks waiting on my phone. I listened to Elizabeth Gilbert, Big Magic, and I listened to the Shonda Rhimes, A Year of Yes. I needed strong women who were positive and, you know, had all of this great advice. So as I'm practicing or washing my dishes or packing my suitcase for the trip, that's what was going on. Positive, positive, positive. Just always forward focused to keep myself in check. And then the day of, when I'm stressed, I tend to be overly emotional. Like if I'm really stressed, I cry over stupid things. So the morning of, as I'm getting ready, I turned on a comedic podcast to make sure I'm laughing and not crying over my hairdryer or something, you know what I mean? So know yourself and know what works for you and make sure you stick to that, okay? So, yeah. Send personal thank you notes at the end. They say now that emails are sufficient, but my friend wouldn't buy that. You wouldn't get the job. So take the time, even though it breaks your hand. And my handwriting's terrible, but I did it, and I sent those letters, and I think they appreciated that. And then from there, you wait, and then it's either offer or rejection. Oftentimes, the rejections will come in the form of an email. For this particular situation, it came in the form of a phone call. And I'm not gonna lie, it felt like a breakup. Because, you know, it was the whole it's not you, it's me thing. We went from that final dinner together of talking about details of our personal lives and showing pet photos to a phone call that was the most awkward and horrible 5 minutes. And then it was just over. And you're left with what could I have done differently, or that whole yucky feeling. So, yeah, as far as an offer goes, I don't have a lot of advice on that piece because my experience at ODU is different. You know, I sent my stuff and they're like, do you want the job? And I'm like, yeah, sounds good, you know. Well, come meet with us, we'll have a chat and I'll show you campus. Like, it wasn't the typical experience. So, yeah, I mean, I've heard that if you do receive an offer, you shouldn't accept it right away. You should take some time to think about it and discuss it with your family and consider negotiations. Yeah, so that's that. Fight the good fight. Do you guys have any other questions for me? If you do, you have my business card and my contact info. Call me, email email me. Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
this is great,
Yeah.
it really is.
I hope it's helpful.
Very
Thinking about
informative.
maybe turning it into a Flute Talk or Flutist Quarterly article. I
That'd
know
be
it's been
awesome.
done before, but not by me. So, you know,
Yeah.
I might, it's information that we need to hear on a regular basis, so.
Or it's something that other colleges would, other Flute teachers, I'm sure, would want you to come give this
Yeah.
to their students.
It's a different perspective too, because you are applying for a flute professor and theory position, whereas some of the other flute talk and flute quarterly issues have been specifically
Yeah.
flute.
But I can tell you the reality is flute and even the position, the posting, flute and theory. Guess what they were asking me when I was there? What else can you do? What else can we put on your plate? That's the reality that we're in right now. So that's something that Alice and I have been talking about a lot. How can we continue to diversify ourselves and still be a master craftsman at the flute? You know what I mean? So,
Because like you said, you're gonna have these downtimes
right.
where nothing is happening,
And
but you have to keep yourself busy to
yeah.
be really,
Yep.
yeah,
And
into it.
yeah. Show that you have this interesting piece that no one else has. So, yeah. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Lots of materials, thank you. These are really interesting. This career now, I don't know if you guys have looked through it yet, but you found it through Barnes and Noble.
Turn it off. We want to stop.